Hail and well met, adventurers. Welcome to Marxist Theories and Lore. Previously I've discussed the great heroes of Marxist history and the theoretical development of the gameplay systems of communism. In this episode we will delve deeper into the Freikorps, the dread monsters that destroyed Rosa Luxemburg and crushed the German Revolution, and how organizers can use them in their campaigns today. The Freikorps are an authoritarian evil undead monster created out of the wake of the Great Imperialist War. It is important to establish context. The process of industrializing war began with the first waves of industrialization itself. By the 1280s, the infrastructure surrounding war was industrialized. The weapons of war were industrialized. The soldiers themselves were industrialized workers. Freikorps are intelligent undead, but of a relatively low challenge rating versus vampires, mummies, and liches. While only CR4, they often appear in large numbers. They may not appear to be particularly strong on their own. They have only 2 hit dice, however, they are made much stronger by their unstoppable horror ability. When reduced to 0 to -10 hit points, Freikorps do not immediately fall unconscious. Instead, they receive a +2 to all ability checks, including attack, and +4 to damage while under 0 hit points. Once they either fail a death saving throw or are reduced to -10 or fewer hit points, Freikorps immediately crumble to dust. When a Freikorps dies, they release a wave of negative energy. Any good-aligned creature under 30 feet away must make a DC 12 Wisdom saving throw, or be stunned for the next round and take 1d8 necrotic damage. The Great Imperialist War saw the greatest horrors of any war up to that point. Because of the advance of weapons technology, all sides were forced to hide in trenches and, if forced to advance, they were faced by great production lines of murder, perforated with massive machine gun embankments, poisoned with shells, disassembled to shredded meat with mortar blasts. The workers forced into these trenches were not immune to the violence around them. They watched their comrades in arms reduced to mince before their very eyes. They were splattered with the viscera of their friends. All the workers forced into the Great Imperialist War were traumatized in this way. There was something different among the soldiers of the German Empire, however. They were told that their nation had a special destiny, and that only they could seize it. And after years in the trenches, they were on the verge of victory. Instability emerged among their great enemy Russia, and then, just as their victory was at hand, the United States Kramered into the scene and ended the war, with them losing. This loss is their first important difference. Watching their friends reduced to cat food severely damaged their very souls. Watching their nation defeated at long last after their great sacrifice was the natural one to their spiritual death saving throw. Their souls were transmitted to the negative energy plane and sapped of all power, while the remnant of their bodies lived on in terrible unlife. They hobbled back home. By this point, the only thing they knew was violence. Normal for them was horrors beyond human understanding. The political situation in 1287 DR was stark. The Social Democratic Party had spent the war debasing themselves. Before the war, they advocated for the unity of the global working class. As soon as things became difficult for the bourgeois politicians operating within the SDP, they abandoned all principles. They cynically reinforced their positions within society. While Rosa Luxemburg and others warned them of the folly of this plan, the elected officials of the SDP instead wrapped themselves in the flag of nationalism. When the Freikorps returned home, they were stripped of their weapons, the war was over, they were no longer needed. But they needed the war. Everywhere they went, chaos and strife followed. And in the wake of defeat, in the Great Imperialist War, the workers agitated for themselves. The SDP professed that they could rework society for the greater good, even after having the careerism of their leadership proven beyond any reasonable doubt. The workers wanted a real revolution, not a few labor aristocrats making themselves fat. The SDP realized their position was tenuous, so they did the obvious thing. They decided to deputize the heroic Freikorps, who had already sacrificed their very souls to make Germany great again. The attempt by ostensible left-leaning government to unleash the horrors against their radical flank is the second aspect that separates Freikorps from the other traumatized soldiers. While they had failed in the Great Imperialist War, the workers were not as well equipped as their enemies in that war. Against street barricades and industrial tools, the Freikorps brought horrors that only they could imagine on the workers. They exterminated Rosa Luxemburg and other radicals agitating for a more egalitarian society. They kept power in the hands of the Social Democratic Party. For a while. Freikorps are a powerful monster in the hands of an organizer. Early in a campaign, they can introduce a real risk of a total party kill. But they can also be strong recurring villains across a campaign. Their love of violence and evil means that they can be inculcated into cults of evil very easily, especially necromantic cults. Freikorps can retain memories of their former life, and even seek people out for help with their predicament only to fall into an inviolate rage. Perhaps people from the Freikorps' past hire the worker characters to protect them from the Freikorps, and that's a hook into a greater campaign. From a gameplay standpoint, they synergize well with lesser undead. They can act as supervisors to unintelligent undead, while you can still have vampires or liches as the managers or owners later in the campaign. A single Freikorps is a powerful enemy at the end of a dungeon for low-level characters fighting their way through skeletons and zombies. And where there's one Freikorps, there's ample room for organizers to leave plot coupons around to drive toward a larger group of Freikorps for the players to fight later in the campaign. A couple levels later, perhaps you can have Freikorps commanding small squads of lesser undead, showing up several times in a dungeon. And in the end, our heroes have to fight a small army of them. Freikorps are one of the most terrible monsters in all Marxist lore. They stopped the Great Revolutionary Wave that could have finally destroyed capitalism and trapped us in bondage for more than a century hence. Undead abominations under the thrall of bloated bureaucratic labor aristocrats. They can add flavor to any organizer's campaign. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. If you want to bring tabletop leftism to the masses, I strongly encourage you to find some kind of group doing good in your community and join in. Salting a union, doing strike support, defending your community from fascists. And if you have too much money and want to do some ineffective altruism, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/socialismisgood, or stay updated about the channel on my Mastodon account, Marxist Lore at mastodon.online.